Let's talk about the business of the day as it relates to theater with your hosts, Darnell Radford and Mitch Weiss. This is The Business of Theater, a working title. Oh, you
No,
could
not
always.
about that.
Well, we want you to live forever, Mitch. So do whatever
I
you have
don't.
to do so that you can live a long, long time.
No, just like cats, now and forever. Please end it. End it.
Well, it could also be your legacy that lives on, and that's how you live forever.
Oh,
So you can die
well
tomorrow
said.
as long as
Well
you have a
said.
legacy intact.
Got yourself
Mitch,
out of that real fast.
yes. Mitch, I know we're looking for a working title, but we cannot name the podcast The Business of Theater, The Best Day Ever.
The best day ever.
Yes.
Why would you ever?
Ever.
I see. You're
Yes.
referring to the show you just saw.
Yeah, I just saw SpongeBob, the SpongeBob musical at Upper Darby's summer stage. It was a lot of fun. Production value was just, top notch. And they had
Oh,
way
yeah.
too many people on stage, which, was great because it's a large stage. It almost
Yeah.
felt like it was going to be chaotic. I was like, look at this. This team looks like they've been rehearsing because they have been. It was great, though.
You
Every
know,
element about it that seemed like it was
the
going to be
best
too
the
big.
best theater when I saw it at the Palace Theater on Broadway, it
Mhm.
was a delight. I was so surprised because I am not a cartoon fan. I'm not a Marvel fan. I hate to say that to everybody. And I
Just
don't need
lost our
theater to be
Marvel fans.
real
You
serious,
with
but
the
I
Marvel?
love those combinations of serious and fun and production values and large casts, everything that we're told coming out of the pandemic we shouldn't be about,
Mhm.
right? And SpongeBob musical was that. I just walked in there and they got me from the second I walked in on Broadway. I didn't see your production, but
Yeah.
it was a hoot. And there's nothing wrong with having a good time in the theater. We
I
still
just
learn something.
Yeah, I just remember seeing. I saw performances of some of the songs, on talk shows, and
Hmm.
there was a Tony presentation, right? One year.
Yeah,
Yeah, there
absolutely. It
was a
was
Tony
nominated.
presentation, of course. And so I do remember seeing that and just remembering that being such a spectacle. But like that opening number, if you're not pulled in by the opening number, just leave the theater because
Yeah.
it's
Well,
gonna be
but
like.
like I said, and I hope that happened at your production. But I remember sitting in the audience at 7:45, and normally I'm going, "Go ahead, I dare you to entertain me." And instead, looking around, they had turned the theater into a cartoon that I was now living in, and I was already drawn into it, and I was smiling at the colors and how ridiculous some of the decorations were. It made me laugh. And so the second the show started, I was already there. This was going to be silly.
Yeah.
And it was beyond silly. It was actually somewhat relevant and silly. I had a great time. So we'll give that a. But again, here's a show that should have made money but lost money on Broadway, and
Mm.
that's a shame. But at least the show's still alive. You
Yeah.
know, but we need to talk about this. Let's go there. Theater, especially Broadway, which is supposed to be the ultimate version. Why are we losing so much money when some people are making so much money off of the losses? This
Mm.
isn't quite the producers,
Yeah.
where they raise
That's what
too
I was
much money,
thinking.
except there are producers on Broadway right now who should be in jail. And
Mhm.
we can't name them because that's called libel. So even though we all know them in the industry, we're trying to figure out what to do. And
Yeah.
meanwhile, the cast and the crew, they're getting a decent salary, but just barely decent. And nonprofits? Go ahead, Darnell, tell them about what we just read today.
Well, um, we, I mean, are we naming names in that article?
Well, they did. We don't
Well,
have to. You can say the head of one large, very famous nonprofit.
yeah.
Okay?
The executive director of is it executive director or
Artistic
executive
director.
artistic director of the largest nonprofit in the country, I think, probably the most notable on the East Coast.
Mm-hmm. Well said.
know, and it's I mean its official name is a festival, but it is out there. But
It was by the way, the announcement was in Broadway Journal, so it's
yeah,
not
it was
on
in
us.
Broadway Journal, so
We're
you can
reading it. We've read
anyway.
this.
In the pandemic, when at the beginning of the pandemic, 2020, when we found out, most people working for cultural organizations found out about their pending pay cut. Um, this executive artistic director still took home $1.15 million.
Well, you're leaving out an important point. It was announced when the press listed that they were cutting everyone's salary and laying off a whole bunch of people, that
Yeah,
the artistic director had agreed to take a 40% cut himself in order to say, I will feel some of the pain.
from the
And
1 million.
then, yes, from what he was already making.
Hmm.
And what they found out by the tax returns, it says in the Broadway Journal, is that actually his salary went up.
Hmm.
So there's an investigation. And then we add that to, while we're at it, two of the other large nonprofits on the East Coast, their salaries went up for the artistic director during the pandemic. Meanwhile, they laid off lots of people, and some of them are only offering minimum wage to people to come work there.
Yeah,
It's what do we do? Well, it's American greed, but this is the theater,
I'm not
and it's
sure if I can.
nonprofit. It's supposed to be different than commercial theater. Is there a
Yeah.
difference? What do you think?
Oh well, once you get to this level, it's commercial theater. You know, if I yes, it is a technicality. It is just like it's just like a multi-million-dollar company calling itself a small business. You know,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you are a small business by technical terms, but um, how are you lumped in with the single member LLC? You know, in calling yourself a small business when you have all this money. And the thing about a nonprofit is that no one owns the organization. So if you are making that kind of money, it's like, you know, who is taking advantage of this organization? I'm pretty sure with that kind of salary, one, you could have hired several people. You could
Yeah.
have probably hired a whole department with half of that, you know, and or you could have brought a program online. You could have done a lot of things with just paying one person for their cachet. And what's interesting about that is it seems like the marketing is so focused on the production and not about the organization or its individuals. So it's
Right.
like I don't understand why this person is so important to make that kind of money. And this has always been an interesting thing for me. I remember early on in an organization I worked for that was considered edutainment. Um, we would have, we would receive some funding, and to commemorate the funding, the receiving of the funding, we would have a party. you know, we would have some sort of event to
Mm-hmm.
celebrate the funding. So somebody gives you $100,000 and you spend $25,000 having a party to celebrate the $100,000. It's like, This could have been an email. It's like that meme of Viola Davis getting up and grabbing her purse and walking out.
Yeah. Well,
I'll have to send you that
and
one.
same point. Listen, and maybe the discussion needs to be who is valuable in a
Mhm.
theater company, because look, I'll be the first to admit when people come straight out of college, I don't care how much experience they have in college, most of them are on the verge of worthless. They are there to learn, but they've got brains. You want somebody who knows how to think, but for the most part, they have no experience. I don't care what a college tells you, they have no experience actually putting on a production and coordinating a staff. So they come in, you're going to teach them. Yes, they have to live. So you have to come up with what is a livable wage at the bottom scale of your organization. But then we have the middle ground. These are the people that you say, I read a script. I like it. Let's find a director, actors, designers, maybe sound designers, uh, production people, carpenters, whoever, administrators. You're going to need a company manager, you're going to need a general manager who is going to put a budget together. Well, how much are these people worth in order for a collaborative art form to take form and to possibly succeed? I mean, should a show that closes opening night or that gets terrible reviews, are you supposed to take their money back? No, they worked hard, but it's the artistic director who put them together. So the question is the artistic director really worth that much more than everybody else?
Yeah.
Are there not, as you said, maybe there are multiple people who could be doing this? Actually, Philly had an experiment. I don't know how it's going, where they were going to have four artistic directors sharing power. Do you remember what theater company that was?
That is Wilma. It's
Wilma. Okay.
Wilma Theater.
Yeah.
Uh,
Don't. Interesting experiment. I have no idea
mhm.
if it matters. Um, but the idea was, of course, without firing who's ever in charge, what you're doing is spreading the wealth and seeing if it does matter. You know, and not everyone's going to have equal talents in that, in that particular position.
Yeah.
Um,
However,
but but it takes a village, right?
in that situation, the head artistic director did announce their retirement.
Hmm.
So now
Okay.
it's still in the process of this co-artistic uh directorship. But yeah, it'll be interesting to follow
And
that.
then the
But
question is, are they sharing one person's salary, or
I
did the
know what is
amount go up?
exactly. Are you all working part-time or is this a third
Yeah.
of the
What's going
time?
on?
Are you just in on meetings? Like maybe you're just in on meetings and someone else is still running the place, you know. Um
It comes back down to: is there anyone out there trying to reconceive how the nonprofit theater and music world has gotten has lost its way? What is, for 2022, what is a viable structure to give back to the community through the art of theater?
hmm,
Because I do believe that's what makes somebody officially nonprofit. They're supposed to have education. They're supposed to certainly entertain with art, with whatever theater or art form they put on, and they're supposed to contribute,
yeah.
um, because they're asking for donations in addition to ticket sales. I would
Well,
think a phenomenal. Excuse me for finishing this thought.
mhm,
If for a phenomenal contribution to the community, I would think you don't have to charge anything. The community would just want to give them a whole bunch of money if it was that good. But if you're
yeah.
just putting on shows that a commercial producer might have produced, are you really providing a great service? And to
Well,
whom?
the thing that we don't want to admit is that even though we know this, because sometimes you can't receive the funding. I mean, you can't receive the funding without knowing someone. There has to be a connection. There has to be a connection into the organization to say, oh, if so, for example, I uh, mentioned to you that our subscriptions are available, and it's your connection to me that out of all of the theater companies in Philadelphia, that you are now a subscriber. So there's a connection here.
Hmm.
And so we think about that too, where it's like, so could this organization receive the funding it receives without the leader at the helm or without this connection? And if so, if that is the case, how do you ensure that the organization can sustain itself past this leader? And usually this is an issue with like founding member organization that has founders syndrome,
Right.
where everything is still being operated the way the founders did it. Like we have many organizations here in Philadelphia that over the past 10 years maybe had a turnover from that sort of mindset. But that thought is, I mean, so I walk into an organization and I'm thinking, okay, so where do I find the contacts for the people who give us the money? And
Yeah.
if those contacts are in your personal cell phone, this might be a problem for the organization. You
You
know,
brought up two very important things. And first of all, I wanted to, when I was talking about collaborative, want to add one person into that list of valuable, the development director,
yeah,
because
mhm,
nonprofit is about raising money. You're talking about,
mhm,
so if the artistic director has personal contacts and they're a reason somebody may give, the development director you hire, it's about who they know. It's about
yeah,
who likes them. It's not just about can they write. Well, I mean, obviously smaller groups have to start from scratch and work with someone who can write a good grant, and have a good mission. But for the most part, it's as the people who hand out the money, they have to get to know you and they have to believe you're real. But you also brought up that certainly in the commercial world, the people, and this has just happened to me this week. I was offered money for certain projects we're working on solely based on the fact that one, they liked the project, but two, they liked me.
hmm,
And they're sitting there listening to me explain the story, just as you were talking about. You have to get involved, you have to know who's there, explaining the process, explaining what the project, how it had
they're
happened,
like,
and who was
you had
involved.
me, you had me at your "I Want" song.
There you go. So that becomes a unique problem for any organization. When Joe Papp left the New York Shakespeare Festival, the donations dropped, of course, because people were giving because they trusted Joe Papp. That's going to happen at any organization, which means your artistic director has to have a personality and a vision of their own. And I don't know that boards think about that.
Hmm,
And plus, how many of them are there out there? It's funny. I know of one new artistic director who they brought in from 3,000 miles away, and I'm going, what? He's going to
yeah.
start from scratch?
What kind of
What's he
connections are you
bringing? He
gonna
has no connections where they're bringing him, even if he has a mindset that says, "Oh, I understand how the process works."
Yeah.
It just, I don't get it. And why aren't you training your staff to rise up in the ranks? Again, I will talking. This is personal. The greatest part about being part of Joe Papp's Shakespeare Festival, I started at one level and I was constantly being given new jobs within the organization until I rose up to be the associate general manager.
Hmm,
And I had no notion that that's what I would do or where I would be. But I was getting to know the organization from the inside out, and they eventually trusted me, one from business to group sales to audience development to, press to wherever it was. I kept moving around and up, and eventually I understood what they wanted done and I knew how to do it. How many organizations have a pathway that, oh, you're starting as a marketing assistant, someday you may be the general manager? How many? Almost none. It's like, well, I'm glad we found you at some college. You're inexpensive and you'll help the marketing director, and then goodbye, and that's it. You
Yeah,
know.
at the fruit themed technology company I used to work for, they called that prepping the bench. Prepping
Mm.
the bench.
Well, let's talk about interns because I know that's
Yeah.
related to all of this.
Mhm.
Um,
Interns are interesting because sometimes there's an intern who needs credit to, to qualify for, to finish their degree, to
mhm.
do various things. So they may not actually have long-term goals with your organization, but at the same time, the organization has a need for staff they can't afford, and so so those two clash. Those two come
Absolutely.
together, and it's sort of like, okay, you know, I could see it going many ways. It's either, okay, so just hang out here for answer our phones for however long you need to get your credits, and then you can go. Or actually, we have this big mailing that has to be done, and so you're going to help us do that, which is, get a machine to stuff these envelopes. you know
Well, I've developed what's the word? Not an opinion, a concept about interns, because I've worked with many, many, many interns. Some of them were fantastic. I do believe that 90% of every intern I worked with learned enough that if they had worked for totally free, that it would have been worth their while. Um, the and yes, in the old days they were free.
Mm,
Now technically it's rude. My concept is this: I know we need to fill some spaces and some work done, but
yeah,
nonprofits need to say we need to get the work done without an intern. Then
mhm,
when an intern comes in, it helps the process that's already there.
yeah,
Right? And so it doesn't become we're filling staff positions. When I was first starting out, it was an assistant position. And you got paid very little, but you got paid and you were on salary, not with benefits, but you were on salary. And you knew that you were part of the staff. You were not called an intern. So, on that basis, I think that is what every theater company needs to start with. And if you can't figure out how to do the work without an intern, something's wrong. The intern is not the solution. The intern
yeah.
is a nice addition. And plus, you owe them an education.
The intern is icing.
Icing. Thank you.
I
Good
think,
word.
yes. Yeah,
Good
I
word.
mean, if you're not, if you hire an administrative intern and they don't walk away understanding how your business is run, and have a greater interest in running a business like yours, then I don't know, like, what are they walking away from besides the credit? What are they walking away with besides the
Right.
credit?
And how much time are you asking from them? And I mean, talking about in weeks, even. A summer intern is different than somebody coming in for 2 weeks to work on a reading who
Yeah,
just wants a little theater credit they can meet, some famous director who's doing the reading or something. And it doesn't mean they both shouldn't be treated well, but there's a difference, and you have to plan differently if someone's coming into your organization or if somebody is working on a specific short-term project. They're
yeah,
both valuable, especially for college students or people that age. Um, but if
but
they're
they
not going
do.
to meet somebody, that's valuable,
Yeah.
that I think is the number one thing. It's not even about, gee, I watched such and such happen. It's about, did they meet anyone that they're going to be able to call upon when they finally hit the real world? That's what I think these organizations really need to offer.
Yeah. And I
It's
think it's
my two
probably
cents.
it's even more complicated the larger the organization is,
Yes, well
because
said.
it's easier to park them into a vacant assistant role or associate role, you know. But really they're supposed to be kind of shadowing somebody
Hmm.
who is doing the work, and then possibly helping while that other person is still prioritizing the work. But yeah,
Yeah, I have another way to think of this, and I'm throwing it at you because I know you're working with a nonprofit. Um,
Mhm.
there are so many experienced senior citizens who have already been through a career, who have nothing to do, and would love to work in theater again. Even they could be actors, maybe they work now and then, but they have a lot of free time. If
Hmm.
you wouldn't give them the position, then you shouldn't give it to a kid.
Hmm.
And the question is, many of the seniors would work for free. Again, it depends how much time they can give. But, if it's 3 days a week and you can get away with that and you can give them $50 for that, there are seniors with experience who would jump at it,
Yeah.
and they might be fine stuffing envelopes if that's what the job is. But it's another way to think of it. We shouldn't be abusing youngsters, nor should we abuse seniors. But you need to think of them as either or. It's both ends of the spectrum need some work.
Well, it's also interesting that you can either apply for this with your generic theater degree. You can apply for this position because no part of your degree is going to show you how a development office is run,
That's right.
particularly. Um, and but we know that, so why not change the curriculum so that it's pretty much a given. Like, this is a very short term internship, but really it's more of a probationary period. It's like we're looking to hire somebody, so we don't even have to think about it if we bring in this intern, because this intern will work for a short period of time, and if they work out, then they're the one we're bringing on.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Well, that could be
you
if
know,
they're going to be available if they're not going back
yeah.
to school in
I
September.
know it's just they have different needs. So I think that that's what happens. It's like if somebody doesn't need much but the credit, then they contribute to the problems of the internship program.
Could
If
be.
if it is
Yeah.
somebody who actually wants to learn something, like let's say somebody's like they want to start their own theater company and they don't know how to get started. So they take this internship, and in the internship they've been sorting out your storage closet, and cleaning up your database, and
Mm-hmm.
now they're calling back your lap subscribers, and is that really preparing them to run their own theater?
You just sparked one of my many um, sore points. I worked at a uh, theater company, um, which was both wonderful and abusive to some people. Um, the the problem becomes, why is any of your staff there?
Hmm.
And what I found was the people at the top, and I was one of them, did not have a real sincere interest in getting to know their staff as people. Therefore, if somebody was really good at playing piano, but they were in your marketing office, and all of a sudden you need someone to just come in last second for an audition and let some actor come in and play it, you wouldn't know to ask them, hey,
Mm.
we need you right now. Can you come in and just play this one song? Because all of a sudden our rehearsal pianist or audition pianist wasn't available. You wouldn't know that. You wouldn't know that somebody had a father who was actually in 3 Broadway shows and might know other people to help your company. I've been told by senior people to tell so and so to go F off because they just didn't want to hear from them. And these people had ideas and they had thoughts. And even though there's a lot of pressure at the top, to try to get the show up, the thing that you keep harping on, and you're absolutely right, Darnell, the most important thing is, what is your organization like and why should we care about it? And that means it's people. So
Yeah.
one person can give $10,000 because their son or daughter is the assistant marketing person, and you wouldn't know that if you didn't make them feel like they're part of the organization and that their opinion matters and that maybe they're actually learning something, or have already learned something. It's hard to know. And that they
Yeah.
are being trained to take your job over when you leave, because the day may come. It doesn't mean you're going to let them.
I think
Uh, you know.
that's also a mindset I don't think everybody has. I remember saying that, in the tech jobs I've had, it's like I want to hire somebody who is capable of taking my job, you know, at any time, like who can step in so that the organization doesn't miss a beat because
Mhm.
I'm off, because I'm on vacation, or because I find another opportunity and I decide to transition out. Like I need to be able to have this person in place. But we've spent so much time. I think I don't know. I'm not speaking particularly about any individual, but I feel like there's a lot of imposter syndrome out there. There's a lot of people who don't believe that they're actually qualified for the roles that they're in, and so they
Almost
are
no one is
protective.
qualified. Theater is crisis management. You
Yeah.
walk in, every day you walk in, something's going to hit you that you have never done before or thought about,
Mm,
all the way to the top. And part of the reason we get excited about doing a new show, we haven't done it before. The possibilities, speaking for Sunday in the Park with George, are endless,
mhm.
right? It's all about your creation. The artistic director, the managing director, the marketing director, the subscription director. These should be creative positions. And therefore, we want to find out. Here's the word that we're going to talk about: unicorn.
Mm,
We want overqualified people. And I will tell you firsthand that most of the people I've worked for do want people that they can step on, that they can keep in their place, not people who can do more than their job, so that in case a crisis happens, they know how to think. The
mm,
receptionist ought to be someone who might get into group sales and the box office at some point, and who might want to be a finance director or take an accounting course at some point in their life. You don't know, but they've got to have more of a, oh, gee, I like theater. Okay, what else do you know? What did you take in college? What did you take in high school? What are your other interests? How does that give us something in our theater company that makes us special? We want to hear that from you. And that's, to me, part of the interview process is, who are you? I know you're young. I don't expect you to have a whole lifetime of experience, but tell me who you are and what your dreams are and what things excite you. And I'm telling you, if the only thing you like doing is playing video games and nothing else, you're probably not going to get hired by me. But if video
mm.
games is one of 20
Yeah.
things you do, yes, multitasking. Plus, you got a brain, you have opinions, you have You think about politics. You read, online newspapers. Whatever you do, there's something you're bringing to the job as a human being. And Darnell, let's be clear, you and I are those unicorns. There's no question. And that's the reason
Yeah. I was
yeah.
I was just about to say I've yes. When I work in nonprofit arts and culture and there's no IT attached to it, I take a
Mm,
considerable pay cut to do that. And I said, I was saying, like, I was like, you have to have the passion, you have to have the interest to want to be here because it's something as simple as having a conversation with your colleagues, and being able to pull knowledge and experience from many different areas to just fuel this conversation that you're having and steer you towards some sort of solution or plan. You know, you can't just sit here and say,
right.
I just love all of this. You know, what do you want to be? Why do you want to work in the theater? Because I love ghost lights.
Well,
Wherever a
and
ghost light
if
is, that's
that's,
where I want to be. I
but
have
I
the
buy
curtain
that
light in
if
my
you can then
room. It's
explain it. I
awesome.
mean, there has to be a story that takes me past that. That's a cute little phrase. But
The
I
history,
you
yeah. I never, yeah, never want my house to be dark,
I
so I have a
think of
ghost
a
light.
story, and only because it just came to mind when I was in my young 20s, and I was in one of my early jobs. Um, I befriended, because he was working there. I befriended a young Denzel Washington, and we used to go out for coffee every day at lunch and sit on a stoop across the street. And he, at that point, was playing a spear carrier in some Shakespeare show. That's all it was. And, he's a youngster also. And I remember, because it stuck with me as such a shock. I remember I asked him, okay, well, any particular role when you become a star? We're dreaming here. When you become a star, any particular role that you believe you have to do, that you were meant to do? And he said, absolutely. I know exactly what it is. I've got to be Malcolm X. And I remember that. And I mean, what? Maybe he's 26,
Wow.
25, something like that. And when he got that role, it was just so exciting. You know, uh, I haven't stayed. I'm not close friends with him anymore and stuff, but we worked together early in the early days. Um, but it's that kind of dreaming. I don't care if some kid who loves a ghost light says, "You know what? But I want to be Hal Prince or Mike Nichols or whoever, or Spike Lee or whatever. This is my goal." And it'll change. That may not be what they do, but they have a vision of what they're working towards. And I can say, well, then how does having this job help you? And then we can have a conversation. It doesn't have to be the right answer. There's no right or wrong. But if someone doesn't
Mhm.
have that vision of themselves, what are we going to talk about? When all of a sudden
Yeah.
somebody calls them up on the phone and says, I want to buy a ticket to the show at your theater, you go, oh, okay, what,
Yeah.
how much? It's like, huh? Some excitement, some reason, some purpose. Maybe, Spike Lee's calling for a ticket. Well, you know who he is? That kind of thing that I expect out of people.
I do like, yes, I do like, when I walk into our offices, when I walk into our office at Theater
Mm-hmm.
Exile, um, we talk about the business of the day. We talk about theater, and outside of our building, what's going on. Has anybody seen a show? Did they hear about this? So and so's doing this. This is exciting. What was the show that you said you were going to be in? And we're having that
Yep.
conversation, and I just remember being in spaces where I couldn't have that conversation.
Right.
It was like an afterthought. I was just like, does anybody want to add anything? We have 10 minutes left. I'm like, oh, you should get down to the
And we
Academy
have
of Music and
and we
see
have a
To Kill a
reason to
Mockingbird. It
explain
turns
why they
out,
should
and they're
see
like,
it.
oh,
And there are issues
okay.
in it that we want to talk about. We
you know,
leave a theater, not always a great show, but when it is, you're talking about
yes,
the ideas and the characters and the actors
mhm,
and everything we can because we love the process, we love the product. And that's why we're in the business. Otherwise, just be an audience member, enjoy it. Nothing wrong with that. That's great. We need them.
yeah,
But most of the investors that I've met and most of the contributors to nonprofits, they want to be
hmm,
part of our world.
oh yeah,
And this is a way in. They're buying a way in just so they can say they went to opening night, they had some connection. Again, going back to what you said, Darnell, if there's more than just you that they have a connection to at that theater, if they know some of the staff, if they've met people, if they're allowed to be a little part of the family, there's more chance that they're going to support you even when you have a flop. And you're also helping the community, I hope. I mean, it can't be one or the other. It's got to be both. Go ahead. We
wish
always wait
I
for that
could
11th
be
hour number from Darnell Radford.
part of that world.
Anyway,
Coming.
so how do we train a unicorn?
I like, there it is. There it is. I want to be
That's right.
where the people are.
But let's start there. And
Yes.
I'm going to give you again while we're telling stories, and I
How
have
do we
no
train a
problem
unicorn?
telling
First,
this
we have to
particular one
catch
because
one.
I'm long gone. I'm never going to work
And
for Disney again. Um, there, I was at Disney, and we were sending Beauty and the Beast to various countries around the world. And I got asked by the vice president if I wanted an intern. Now, I pretty much in that position worked alone. I was doing budgets and working on these things, and I don't think an intern can understand that initially. But I said, sure, I'll come up with some teaching thing. And they said, great. And they came back to me and they said, oh, hope you don't mind, but there's a requirement that the intern be a minority. And I said, that's not a problem. Good. They sent me, and I had to work out of their employment, their HR department, which had the internship list. They sent me 11 white women and one Asian woman. And the requirement, because they had gotten a grant from the federal government, and the grant said it had to be a minority. And when I questioned the office about it, they said, well, under the rules, women are minorities. I said, well, do you not have any, my term, real minorities? Since the majority of nothing against having a woman, but it could be a black Hispanic, woman,
mm,
Um, and they said none have applied. This is Disney. I said, how could that be? Did you
yeah.
let anyone know the program exists? It's, by the way, it was a paid internship. And they said, well, it's listed somewhere. I don't know. I said, well, I can take out my phone book or walk down the street, and I promise you,
Mm.
by the end of the week, I'll have 5 people who want to work for Disney and get paid, right? Who are minorities. Would you like me to do that? I said, no, you're not allowed. So I ended up with 2 interns, one Asian woman, one white woman. But that story is if you don't go out and recruit, even when you have no openings, it's a 365-day, 7 days a week, 24-hour a day process. You must say hello to every creative person that you meet. Every party, you must find somebody, it doesn't be a minority, but you must meet people. You have to talk to them. What are you into? That's why I could have opened my phone book, because I had plenty of people that weren't my great friends, but I knew they would love to work for Disney. That's
Yeah.
part of the process of the people at the top. That's who you're supposed to be looking for. Who's the talented people? That's where you find, out of 20 people, if you're lucky, you'll find one unicorn.
Yeah.
And that's the person you call in. And that way, you're not just waiting for people to send you blank resumes. You know?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's true because some of the missions, first of all, everybody doesn't, you know, make a beeline to the mission statement of a theater company. They may have seen a show and they'll think about the kind of show that they saw and can they see themselves in it or through it. And that might draw them to the theater company.
Mm-hmm.
But but yeah, if you don't, if you also every time you look up, if let's say you've sat in the audience and you saw a curtain speech, I mean, and you're there for the curtain speech, and there's no diversity there either. Hi, I'm the board chair. I'm white as snow, and I'm the artistic director. I'm also white as snow. And it's like, okay, and and then on top of that, you're producing a show that is like urban,
Right.
whatever they call urban. It's urban. This is the first time these actors of color have ever graced your stage.
Well, but again,
Um,
that's the
they don't
senior
even know what's
management has a
upstairs,
responsibility, and this
in
isn't
your
just to
theater,
diversity.
because
It has to do
they've
with
only they've
meeting
only been in the
younger,
building for
newer,
auditions,
and
and
sometimes
they've only
old
only been
people,
to the dressing rooms.
but meeting
Um,
so that you have a
yeah,
list of
it's
people
like,
who aren't already in your company. You should, if you can't replace somebody, let's say
mhm,
your development director leaves, and this happens a lot because they're in great demand. They leave. Why should it take you a
mhm,
month or two to replace them? You should have met tons of people along the way that you can call up and say, by the way, can I convince you to move to us? Right? And then you're looking for an assistant. The development director calls you and says, I lost my assistant. Who else can you get? Well, what are you doing? You're calling NYU and saying out of the blue? Or do you have a list of people that you met who might be good in that position already, or who are
yeah,
a unicorn and might be great as an assistant? You need to have what in the old days we called it a Rolodex, but it's in your phone book. You need to have these people available. Darnell, you know this. When we do our readings at the farm, we could have a role for a major star. They're not going to do a reading, so we open up our phone books, and these are actors, many of which we don't know personally, but we've seen them. We've said hello to them. They know we exist. So I can email them and say, hi, this is Mitch. If you remember, we met under such and such. Now all of a sudden, I'm not a complete stranger. We're doing a reading. We have a great role. Are you available and would you consider it?
mm,
And all of a sudden, we end up with a great actor that we didn't know before who said yes without us having to hold tons of auditions, which we don't have money or time for. And it's a reading. It's not
yeah,
even that we're putting on a production. It only works if you have a phone book. And by the way, on Broadway, the qualification for a general manager, is what used to be called a Rolodex. If I tell you I need such and such designer to work on this show, the general manager needs to be able to just say, got his personal home
yeah,
phone number, and you call him up, even if he has an agent. That's what a general manager does. They have connections and they can break through all the red tape. You still have to negotiate, of course. It's still about money. But yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
Let's be clear for our audience. You're about the pandemic.
Okay, so
And I call it
because
a
you
coma. I
mentioned
call it a
that,
coma. We went
um,
into a coma.
there's been a
We're just coming out of the
long
coma.
intermission, and in this long intermission, there's been quite a bit of transition.
Uh,
So, uh, yes. So,
mhm.
what if all your a coma?
No,
Yeah.
but
So,
there's an answer.
what if
There
your
are two
contacts
answers
have
to it.
dried up?
The quick one, which isn't as
Like, because
helpful,
I know
is you
sometimes I
start
think
making new
about,
ones
like, someone
right
will
now.
ask me,
You
"Yeah, do
call
you
people
know
up,
of
you
a
when you go to a
designer?"
show,
And I'm
you
like,
find out the
"No."
name in there. You
I
try
mean,
to
I
write yourself a
haven't
list
worked
of
with
somewhere to
anybody
kind
in
of
3
to start
years,
with.
so I don't know
I
where
have a
anybody
story for
is.
that later. But the most important way is the contacts that you still have, you use them as your resource. If you
Yeah.
need a designer,
Mhm.
you call me or someone else in the farm or someone who you used to know at Philadelphia Theater Company or wherever you do, you use what you've got left. And
Mhm.
because they're going to call you back. I do know on Broadway shows, there are so many rule books, and there are 100 plus pages small print. Every manager on Broadway calls each other
Mhm.
to say, by the way, you used Jeff as a lighting designer. How much did you pay him? Or um, did you have any problems with him? Or do you know how I can call him at home? I want to talk to him before I call his agent. And if they say no, they'll say, but I know someone who did.
Mm.
And you start calling each other. That's what makes a community. But number one, I will tell you, we just hired an understudy actress who went on at a show we just saw, to remain nameless because I don't want to do that. We just hired someone to be in a reading who all I said was, I
Mm.
congratulated you after seeing such a show and you told us the story that you were the understudy and had almost no rehearsal. And you went on that night. And we all thought you were wonderful. We think we have a role that's perfect for you. Would you be interested? Even went to the agent. And the agent said she'd love to do it. It was that simple. Right. Absolutely.
Mm. There's so much value. There's so
Mm-hmm.
much value when you tell someone that you think they are the right choice, because it just it plays on the psyche. It plays on that psychology, and it makes you think, it's like, wow, if they already believe in me, I need to move in a direction. This is all you ever want. It's for whoever you're working with to believe in you. And this is some of the guidance that I tend to give back too. It's
Oh,
like,
of course.
it's on the one hand, it's good to have all these people reach out to you, and because they know you and they know you're capable of doing it, but then
Yeah.
you have to
But
be
that's
honest
staff
about whether you
also,
can
not
or
just
not. So
actors. If
sometimes you
you
do
tell
feel
some, like I said,
obligated,
if you're keeping a
because someone
list
asked you, but
and you
at the
said, you know
same
what, they
time,
did
you
a
do have
great
to
marketing
say,
campaign.
well, do I
Sometimes you
have
just
time for
call
this?
up the
Can I
marketing
make time
director
for
and
this?
say,
But this was the area I wanted
I
to
have
be in
nothing to offer
anyway.
you.
So
I just
yes,
wanted to say I thought it
I'll
was a great
squeeze this
campaign.
in.
Can you tell me
Anything
how
that
that was put
matters, you will
together?
make time
And they
for.
may say to you, oh, it wasn't
Um,
me.
you
It
will make
was
space.
my assistant who did that whole thing. And then you find out, oh, who was that? That's great. Just somebody to keep in my head. Be honest with them. And you start creating a list of people. Maybe you even go out for coffee with them. I've done that with tons of people. And that's part of the mentoring process. But along the way, 3, 4 years later, they may be the person you hire. You know, I found anyway, and it's friends of friends. You know, which is the hard thing for people to say. Well, what about us?
Yeah.
We don't know anybody, and how do we get there? Well, guess what? You need to reach out. I have never said no, nor any casting director I know has ever said no
Yeah.
to anyone just reached out and asked for information, or just, do you have 5 minutes for me to look at my headshot, to look at my resume, and tell me if this would ever get across your desk? You know, I don't. You have to make an effort. That tells me there's a bit more of a unicorn in you. It always comes back to Sondheim. Yay, Sondheim. Thank you, Darnell. That made my day. uh, very funny. And we lost the show. Isn't that sad?
And they
It's
meet
coming
at
back what?
parties through the
Oh, on
friends of
tour.
friends who they never know.
Yeah, everything. They try to make everything tour. Who knows? The problem is that they don't think the middle of the country likes the same things
It's
as
such
New
a
York.
beautiful
So
song,
they're always
too. It's
hesitant.
like, yeah,
It's a shame because I don't
that song,
think the middle of the country is
it makes
as
me weepy.
the
I know, but
theater
it's coming
part
back
of the
to
middle of the country
tour.
is as backward as they
It's
think.
coming back to tour. It's going to tour, right? So we're looking forward to it. Yeah, but
Yeah.
this is true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean yeah, it's unfortunate. Like when you paint a state in the country with a particular brush, you just assume everyone
Well, and
there
the point
is
again is
there
which
is like that,
theater,
but it's
right?
no.
That's
It is kind of
let's see
odd.
what I
Like
got.
I think about that with a lot of shows that are on
That's oh,
Broadway.
there we go, a
Oh,
little better.
we were talking about it
The
with Fat
lighting
Ham. You know, like
is in my eyes.
could Fat Ham tour
Um,
across the country?
there,
And
the
the
old
answer, you
days,
know, we're
quote
like,
unquote,
why not?
this
But
before
then
my
it's
day,
like,
just so we're
I don't
clear,
know
I'm not
about
that old.
Kansas. You know, like I don't know.
Hair,
Do we
they
know?
wouldn't allow
We
hair
don't know.
in Omaha, Nebraska, right
Yeah.
in the late '60s because it had a nude scene. And again, the point is, well, if people bought a ticket and they know there's a nude scene, what do you care, right? But to not allow it to go there says the leaders, again, the theater owners, who's making these decisions for us? If a show is good and people want to be both entertained and enlightened, that's what theater is about. I would think a lot of people want to. Yeah, they need to be warned if you don't want your 6-year-old to see
Yeah.
a darkly lit naked body, then you don't take them to hair. Life goes on, you know. But I know my grandmother would love to see hair every time she could. She didn't care. Um, which brings us to, what do we do? And this is for another discussion. I don't think this is for today, but I think we need to. Uh, what do we do with every new play that's being written? Because
Yeah.
there's almost no place for them to go. And I have been, you know this, I've been exploring
Yeah. Yeah.
doing original works. Yes.
I always leave it open. We need more stages. Yeah, we need more stages. I think on the, I think on the other side of this, we need to imagine, you know, there's a theater company that had a main stage at one point, and then down the road, you know, they maybe they expanded in their building and now they have an experimental space And who knows, maybe they also have a children's theater. These things weren't always there, but they added them later. And I think there should be a virtual stage. I think there should be a virtual stage. And it's not necessarily like just recorded this. It just means like it's sort of a platform where we can showcase new work all the time. And better we'll get better about it,
You know what it comes
as we
down to,
progress.
Darnell?
But it could start simple with
But
what we've
here's the trick.
done with
I'm with you
Zoom. We already know
100%.
we're over that.
But
So
we
we
need
now
people
we want
like
to try
you
to now we
who
want to elevate
and
that. So we think about,
some
oh,
television people.
what if I had
There
multiple
are companies
cameras?
doing this.
And
They're very expensive
so what if it is a
because
space,
it is
but
about
it's
putting on
multiple
a TV
cameras
show.
and it's beamed
And
and
the
it's on our
union's
website,
involved because
this
you
this
want to work
thing,
with
but the quality is
professionals.
all there and
And I don't
everything.
necessarily mean
This is an
everybody,
opportunity to
but you
just sort of
do. Um,
introduce this work,
and people are entitled to make a living
you know?
from this. No problems. It takes a lot of additional designers, directors, the
Mhm.
equipment,
Yeah.
um, and planning that is very, very, very expensive compared. I mean, not that Broadway isn't expensive, but Broadway has already started to do that where they take their shows and they do film them on stage. They've just started. There's a company that does it all the time. They're not always as exciting, but yeah, it would be a great idea. How do we do that in a cost effective way? I had started to, and you and I were talking about this. How do I bring a small show to Philadelphia when it's already put together in New York? And what I discovered, because budgets are my thing, the cost that
Mm.
is prohibitive is the housing and transportation. Cannot figure out a way because it costs people money to leave their home in New York or wherever they are, and they have to eat, and you don't have to pay them a fortune. The salary isn't the issue. You can afford that, and they deserve it. So the question is, especially with the cost of housing these days, or hotels, or bed and breakfast, or Airbnb, whichever way you go, you want to
Yeah.
rehearse, which could be done in the hometown, but then you still eventually have to go there. How long do you run it? How do you pay for their housing during that time? It makes it prohibitive. So the question is, how do we do this? Um, the good news is you are starting to think about it. We're trying to find ways, and it could be virtual. It could be you do it this way, and then you present it that way, and then somebody, But having separate auditions in Philly, when you've already done all the work, seems the wrong idea. Not that I'm against using Philly actors, but it's like now you have to come down for auditions, and now you have to. It's a whole new process, and that adds to the cost also. So it's tricky.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I think no one's
Yeah.
really. I mean, there are people who have thought about this, and we need to come together. But there are some ideas out there
Mm-hmm.
that they just have to, we just have to
Well, like I said, there
trial
are
and error,
companies already
see
doing
what works and see what
it.
doesn't. But I think I think we all just have to, just like that article we referenced a couple of episodes ago. Everything has to change. We can't. uh, it does seem like a lot of companies are trying to get back to 2019, and we need to look towards 2023 and start thinking more creatively.
agree. And you and I, outside of the podcast, I have ideas on that
Yeah.
are based on things you've said that we haven't discussed yet.
Yes.
So we will, in a
So
teasing
that's
fashion,
it. And
leave
that's why you
this
keep tuning
from the
in, because
audience, and you and I will
we'll just,
change the
I don't
world.
know what to sing. Hmm. Hmm.
Okay. You want
Yeah.
to sing us out?
I can't do that one justice. I love it though. Yes. Yes.
Move on.
Move
How about another Silent Hive?
on. That's it. Move on. Yeah. Okay. Anything you do, give us more to see.
Okay.
I'm
Yeah,
jumping
it's
all
hard
over
to.
it now.
It's better with a duet,
uh,
and I can't
anyway, that's the
sing it.
business
I
of
can't sing it.
theater, a working
All right.
title. I'm Darnell Radford, and we'll see you at the theater. Thank you for listening. Tune in next time for another episode of The Business of Theater, a working title, with Darnell Radford and Mitch Weiss. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Share the podcast with a friend, colleague, or give us some social media love. This podcast is an Emory production. Visit us online at em3ry.com/TBOT. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at em3ryotm.